Good evening, friends. Apologies, I am 12 minutes late. I had a little technical difficulty getting in to Facebook. It kicked me out a couple times as I set myself up, and I didn't realize it. It said I was live, but it actually didn't run that way. So my apologies to all of you who are waiting. But at least you have hopefully waiting with a little bit of wine, and this wine in particular, which is a unique one. As I was saying just to myself, because I wasn't actually on the live video, this wine's quite expressive. So if you're here, please let me know, and I will verify that this is actually working this time. I know a couple people just called the restaurant. I heard the phone ring. So again, apologies for the late and delayed start, but we'll get rolling. The wine will have changed faster in our discussion than it does on a typical basis. So Veronica and Rick, thank you very much. And David and Allison, thank you guys for hanging in there while I was figuring this out. I had to change locations, and so I was a little bit zealous and kind of wanted to be outside relative to this beautiful spring night, and I guess the connectivity didn't work as well as it should have. So Renee and Curtis, hello, hello. Good evening to you. And Johnny and Kristen, you did not miss anything. So if you're late coming to this, all the better. We're just getting started. I'm just getting started. Everybody else was here. And Sarah's with us as well. Oh, Bill Hatch, hi. How are you? Good evening, sir. Great to have you with us. Thank you for joining along. All right. Without further delay, this little number, it's red, right? What do you see? What do you taste? What do you smell in particular? Let's work our way first, of course, right through the visual. So a red wine, lightish in color. What do you see when you swirl the glass and the formation of that ring that kind of runs at the top level of where you swirled the wine? It'll then form streaks, which can be called tears as they fall. And then do they stay? And if they stay, they're legs, and the legs that form can tell you a lot about the wine, and we'll discuss just that. Tell me, do you see tears, and do they run slowly? Do they run quickly? Do you see legs that form? Dean and Bobbin are with us. That's wonderful. And Jonathan, greetings from the bar. Yes. Fantastic. And captions on. Perfect. This is great. A few people have played this game before, actually on site too. So Jonathan has the wine downstairs, sitting in the bar, and he's playing, and evidently has as good a connectivity as I did anywhere else in this building. So tears and pretty quick. Allison, thank you very much. Yes. So an indication of ripeness, of the potential for ripeness in a site. So those tears and those legs are indications of the amount of alcohol that's in a wine, or the amount of sugar and alcohol that's in a wine, and how viscous the wine might be has a relationship to ripeness. How does that work? So as a grape grows up from a little ball of acid to a ball of acid with more sugar, that sugar is what yeast eats to create alcohol. The riper a grape, the more sugar in the grape, the more potential for alcohol. The fuller and more robust wines will, generally speaking, have more sugar in the grapes and come, broadly speaking, from a riper, warmer climate. So if you see something that's, generally speaking, deep, dark, rich, and full of very big, thick, juicy tears that form stout legs, you're thinking about a more robust, warmer climate production of a bigger grape, bigger, thicker skin, deeper, richer grape. If you're lighter, and on the flip side of that, if you've got a light kind of presenting grape, and the tears are fast and running quickly, you might have a lower alcohol wine. This isn't to say that there aren't exceptions to all of what I've just said. It's just a way to start to create some parameters. You can put bumpers up on the lanes of a bowling alley and still not get a strike. So you want to make sure that you're helping kind of create the best environment to make a really good best guess or great throw down the alley, to make sure that you get as many pins down as possible. And so we're going to try to keep chipping away at the pins as we evaluate the wine. So yes, Rick's picking up on something which I was touching base on before this actual live video started. And I was saying there was a great deal of expressiveness in this wine, and I wasn't trying to smell it first. I was still doing what we do every time, which was to evaluate it from a visual standpoint first. But there was an expression of aroma that jumped right out of the glass. And for Rick, that's Italian. So you pay attention to that. Like if your mind's picking up on something, your olfactory sense, almost your secondary sense, it's not even such an intentional cognition. If that's picking up on something, draw it out, call it out, and then put it aside for a moment as we work this process, and you'll come back to that. And so, Johnny, that can happen. There could be like a little bit of soapiness or something in a glass where Johnny is noting that his glass is different than Kristen's, and you can have kind of a different texture in the glass. Maybe you scrubbed it clean and there's like a little bit of grit in there, or you've created some grooves and that can slow things down, or maybe there's a little bit of soap left in the glass after cleaning it. That can change the viscosity. But in any case, we'll always default to what Kristen's glass is, if that makes sense to you. I'm pretty sure you understand that to be the case. And so Sarah's also picking up on something Italian. So something Italian, there's sort of like a fruitiness, right? There's an herbal quality, right? And then there's oftentimes a sour fruit. So with sour fruit and kind of ripe fruit and maybe even medicinal fruit, there's kind of a range of fruit that I pick up on Italian. And we've had this happen before where we're thinking about a wine and it seems Spanish, it seems Californian, it seems New World, it seems Old World. Pay attention to that. Jonathan's noting some Nebbiolo and Barbera. These are all great. So keep these ideas, and we're going to come back to them. And Dean's picking up on the aromas right away too. Cherry, absolutely. Currants, haven't tasted it yet, but it smells a bit sweet. I haven't tasted it either, so we'll see in a second. But from the visual side, we've got a red wine, and is it reddish in orientation? Is it purple in orientation? Is it kind of brick colored? Is it tawny? So anything there. And then we're going to look at the rim. We're going to evaluate the rim around the outside and see, is there a variation of color from the outside of the rim into the middle of the wine? And that variation could indicate some age. If there's a little wateriness, kind of a little thin layer of watery meniscus around the outside, that's also an indication of maybe some higher alcohol. I'm getting a little bit of that. Not much color variation. What happens with color variation is usually an indication of some age. So I'm thinking this is relatively young. Reddish in color, right? Ruby colored. Candy, Kevin, and Kathy, good evening to you. We're just getting started as I was starting late due to a little technical difficulties. So, okay, so smell the wine now. And remember, we're always looking for a few things. Fruit, earth, and wood. A few things. On the fruit side, we've got quite a few notes already in terms of cherry and currants. Italian notes were put out. Earth can be rocky, mineral, salty, saline elements. It can be leather. It can be kind of humus and forest floor and manure and things of that sort. Bark. And then wood will be the expression of oak on a wine. And that can oftentimes be spices, holiday spices, a little bit of dill. You could find cedar. You could find kind of roasted corn, vanilla, those types of elements. Sean and Sam, welcome. Delighted to have you with us. As first timers, we're just working our way through a process of evaluating the wine. We first look at the wine, and then we smell the wine, and then we taste it. And at each stage, there are a lot of things we can learn about a wine just from that stage alone. And then we put all those ideas together to create a sense of what we think this wine might be. So, hey, Scott and Julie, good evening to you guys. Welcome. Little wet stone on the nose, so a little bit of a wet stone being some of the earth. What about some fruit? The cherry still for everybody else? There was a really prominent element when I first opened this of a pyrazine, which is a chemical that's related to or found in bell peppers and greenness, kind of a vegetal note. Young Italian Barbera, very cool. So Barbera giving you some texture and some roundness, some tart fruit, some tart red fruit, sometimes even black fruit, but cherries for sure. So yes, we're all kind of picking up on that red fruit profile. A little bit of kind of minerality. Did I just see too? I think Taylor, you're saying nail polish remover, and that is a very key point. Nail polish remover, when you smell that in a wine, it's due to a compound called volatile acidity. And volatile acidity is found in a lot of wines. It's technically a fault in wine. In a lot of wines, it's part of the character of that wine. It can be a problem when it's too great a concentration in the wine. It kind of strips away everything else. You don't get any more fruit. You don't get anything else. You just get this nail polish remover element, or sometimes you get this vervy acidity that's just a little bit wild. It's volatile. It's kind of just, it's angular, not quite always balanced, but can be compelling, and in small and manageable doses. For some people, any amount of volatile acidity is too much, and it just sends them off, and the wine becomes uncomfortable. But so, yep, I get a little tiny bit of that. I think that's part of that here. And oftentimes, this is again a generalization, when you pick up a little bit of volatile acidity, you're generally speaking about Old World. Not always, definitely not always. It happens in the New World too. But if I was given a choice and said, there's volatile acidity in this wine, you can't smell or taste anything to do with the wine, where would you place it? I would probably think about it being in the Old World more. All right, so cherry, some mineral quality. We've got a little bit of VA, an Old World presentation, something Italian most people are thinking. That's interesting, that's great. So we've got established all of that, and we haven't tasted the wine yet. And the Barbera idea, the Northwestern Piedmont idea, being where Barbera is from. There's Dolcetto up there. There's Nebbiolo up there. There's the potential for those grapes in here. And let's taste this. So as you do, if you're expecting Dolcetto, if you're expecting for sure Nebbiolo, you'll be looking for tannin. So we're going to evaluate the taste of this wine first before we pick up on the flavors and the aromatic sensation that kind of fills in those flavors. So give the wine a taste. So, is it a light-bodied wine, a medium-bodied wine, or a robust wine? Is it, and you've heard me do this before, but does it have the kind of experience in your mouth like skim milk, like 2% milk, or whole milk? Does it have viscosity and roundness and richness, or is it more on the lighter side? It's lighter than water, right? For sure, because it has alcohol in it, and the alcohol has density and viscosity and texture. So it's definitely above that. Is it very light? And if you think about, say, Sauvignon Blanc, typically a New Zealand kind of fresh and easy Sauvignon Blanc will be sort of like skim milk. It'll be light and easy. The step up into that might be something like, Chablis, something that has a kind of a textural quality to it, but it's not huge, so something neutral oaked, nothing that's terribly robust or big. And then you go up into something like Petit Verdot or Tannat or California Cabernet, that you get big Australian Shiraz. Something that has volume and texture would be more on the robust side. This is a wine that comes in where for you guys? It's on the lighter side for sure. Medium light. Rosso di Montalcino, I think that's nice too. Yeah, that's a good call. New World, Old World, I think that's a good question, Allison. We're going to come back to that. A lot of people are on the Old World side. I might be too. I'm not positive though. I'm really not positive yet. Light and medium. And the body is a little bit acidic. So you've got a high acid, medium acid. It has a little bit of tannin for sure, Bill's noting, which I agree. Not a ton though. It's not as a persistent a tannin profile as I would expect, say, from Nebbiolo. So it's light to medium bodied, right? It has almost a real light quality, a light approach, and then it gets a medium weight in the middle, and the tannins sort of address the wine at the very end, maybe the last quarter of the wine experience in the mouth. And Dean, thank you for your comment, because yeah, that's exactly what I'm experiencing too. Tannin seems separate from the fruit, maybe because of the youth. They haven't quite integrated yet. This is a wine that has a little bit more coming out right now. There's some umami aroma. There's a little seaweed kind of a note. There's a green bell pepper that was there. It's kind of shifted maybe into that seaweed. There's a toasted sesame, so there's maybe a little bit of wood. Young Sangiovese, Jonathan's throwing out there. That's a good call. Like a Rosso, the Montalcino. Candy Aussie. Like a Shiraz Aussie? Yeah, could be. But I'm not thinking Shiraz like deep valley floor Barossa, but maybe somewhere more, a tiny bit more fresh, cool climate, not as aggressive. Some of that pyrazine element that I keep picking up would take me to Cabernet Franc. Um, Alcohol, yeah. So that richness, there's a little bit of heat on the back end of this, but not a lot. So 13.5 I think would be about fair. So it's a moderate amount of alcohol, a low to moderate amount of tannin, a low to moderate amount of texture or robust quality in the wine. Uh, it's aromatically expressive. Mm. Minerality is kind of playing it through in terms of some salinity. It's got high acid, which is making me pucker at this point. Ooh. Kevin, you're going to Washington State. Interesting. Washington, like Syrah for you from there? And Italy has an underlying taste that's not necessarily here. That's fair. I think there's components here that seem quite Italian, and in other ways, perhaps not. Um, Taylor, I understand that completely. For some people, as I said, their sensitivity is way more heightened than others, and once you see that and it tractor beams you, you can't get past it. And so, apologies that that's the case here. I think that's part of the experience of this wine, but it's not the only one. As we're picking out other fruit components and things of that sort, a little bit less so on the palate. I'm trying to blow some of it off. That's so all right. So if you're thinking about salinity and minerality, and you're thinking about something that's generally speaking a little bit lighter, but not quite as robust, Syrah from Washington State might be a bit heavy and big a call for this. It would have to be a lighter expression, although that can exist. Last night we had a wonderful evening, spending some time tasting wine with Sonia from Casa du Metz, but really from Clementine Carter. That's one her main brand, and she does 100% whole cluster presentation of her wines, and that gives you a lightness and expression. And so maybe that's part of the wine equation here, in that you're not getting the same density and full extraction that you might get typically or have that expectation for from, say, a Washington Shiraz, Syrah, an Australian Shiraz, if it is Syrah, for example, that we're thinking about. Western Mediterranean, Bill's thrown out there, which is nice. That salinity element there. So if we're in a salinity kind of call, we're going to get that most often from something that's sort of sea facing, but not necessarily right there, but having some kind of maritime influence. So the Mediterranean, something come down toward Provence. Maybe we're in Spain somewhere. Certainly there's plenty of Mediterranean influence to be found in the way of Italy. But you can get that in Australia too. You can get that in New Zealand. David, yes, I like that call too. There's that spicy element that's here that we had relative to a Lebanese wine that we've had in the past, the Chateau Moussard, the Oshar. That was pretty neat. Cherries here. So we're not huge alcohol, moderate alcohol. So that coastal kind of call is a good one because you're not going to get crazy warmth. Even if you have a wonderful warm climate on the coast, you get a cooling effect by way of it being impacted by the sea and it modulating and tempering the heat. And so we did, Jonathan, we had the Chateau Moussard once that we tasted in this lineup. This was years ago. Tony actually did it, but it was not Chateau Moussard's red. It was the Oshar family red, which is Grenache based. So, Croatia, Bill, very cool idea. So like, yeah, I don't think we're as warm either. I think that's a fair call, Jonathan, that this isn't necessarily that, but it has elements like it. It has some of, I mean, there's some volatile acidity on Chateau Moussard too, which is part of that experience. At about 20 minutes in, by way of our talk, but which is actually 30 minutes in. Wine usually changes. So the grape varieties, that's something with this kind of color, that kind of maritime influence. You can work the grape variety, you can work places, and then work to grape variety, right? So most of you are throwing out place ideas. So if you're talking about northern Italy, we're talking about Nebbiolo and Barbera, Dolcetto perhaps. If you're talking about kind of Rosso, Montalcino, Sangiovese, you're talking about Tuscany. You could have sort of a Bulgari lighter red or a Rosso de Montalcino giving you something that's not quite as complex as the Sangiovese that you'd find in a Brunello di Montalcino. That's nice. That's an absolutely fair call. We could be talking about, if we're talking about Washington State, I'm not sure, maybe kind of a fun Grenache. You know, I've tasted some wines that are interesting that are a little bit lighter in presentation from the Hood River range. And I'm not sure about that. Carmenere, Candy's throwing that out. That would typically be something you'd find from South Africa, or South America, excuse me. That could be very interesting, and I thought that too at the first part of the evening because of the pyrazine note, the bell pepper note. I could throw into that mix Cabernet Franc. Bill's throwing out the Sutro, also Northern Italy. Yeah, that absolutely plays right with like a grape called Tiraldigo. Pinotage, thank you for that, Jonathan. Chilean from the Carmenere side, but if we go back to Sutro, also you could be up in the northern part of Italy. You could be sitting with, anything from Pinot Nero to Lagrange to some other fun varietals. Tiraldigo is a grape that we have on the list from up that way. Merlot even in a lighter, more kind of angular expression. Not quite the minerality, maybe. Generally not as much of the minerality there. Nothing quite Portuguese in here, I don't think. It's not quite as structured and rich. I don't get the sense that this is Spanish necessarily. I mean, maybe Mencia, right? I guess it's a grape that has the influence, but I don't think so. Verona, Rick, yeah. We could be playing with multiple Ciano. Excuse me, a Corvina kind of blend from up in Valpolicella, kind of that region a little bit for it. We could be talking about Bardolino and kind of Lake Garda. That would be very interesting because that's a lighter wine that has that sort of profile to it. I believe we've done that one before, but things can repeat. So there was some mention or thought of Australia at one point. Do we think Australian Shiraz? I don't think so, but maybe cooler climate. So anybody have a really clear and committed thought? Monastrell, Dean? Monastrell, man. It would be a lighter expression of Monastrell than I've had. That doesn't mean it couldn't be. It doesn't have... I kind of associate Monastrell with a little bit more earth, a little bit more funk, and a deeper quality, almost moving more red to black. But again, that doesn't mean it's 100% the case always. I'm a little stumped on this one. Well, I don't know, Grena. Or you think it's saying Grenache, maybe? Maybe that shortened up or sent before you finish typing. Grenache, yeah, we could absolutely be dealing with a lighter expression of Grenache. Certainly the cherry elements and so kind of an easygoing Grenache. Scott, you're 100% stumped. I'm pretty much with you. Like, this one's got me. I'm gonna be throwing a dart at a board based on what we've said. And so when you're in this spot, right? Non-traditional site, non-traditional grapes. That's a fair guess. And we have some absolute historical evidence that that could happen in this tasting, right? There's a possibility for this to be a wine that we just don't know. I'm pretty stumped too. So you go back to the process and you get yourself closest you can and then make an educated guess. So a lot of you thought Europe right off the bat, and that was based on an expression that this had tears that formed legs, but they're thin legs and they're kind of dissipating fast. So not a high alcohol wine, medium body, light to medium body, has a little bit of tannin expression, but not a great deal of it. It's youthful. It has cherry profiles. It had a little bit of a pyrazine note. It had a little bit of a bell pepper that moved into sort of an umami, sort of kombu seaweed kind of thing. There's, I just can't get past that. We made last night for this wine dinner with Sonia a kombu and shiitake mushroom broth, and filled some dumplings with mushroom, oyster, and shiitake, filling with ginger and garlic and scallions and a little bit of sesame oil. And this wine just like would be fun with that. And so it almost reminds me a lot of her Saint Ynez kind of Grenache that was whole cluster. And so from a non-traditional way, there might be a little whole cluster element here. I think that's what I'm spending a moment just smelling that. And when you smell a set of table grapes, or if you get a chance to smell wine grapes, and you get to smell the stems, and they're a little bit green, so there's a smell of that here. And so it's less about pyrazine, it's less about the bell pepper, and more about that. So a whole cluster, it can happen anywhere. People can decide to do it. It oftentimes happens with grapes like Grenache, grapes like Pinot Noir, grapes like Syrah. And so, and that does beg the question, should we be talking about a blend? And I should say that does. The comment by Kevin begs that question of should we be talking about a blend? And remember, when we talk about blends, especially for those of you that maybe hear the first time, when you're tasting a wine and you've got your profile building, and the profile has real disparate parts to it, like it's both ripe fruit and underripe fruit. How do we have the two of those things together? You might get two different picks at different points and blended together, some winemaking technique that would have added that dimension, but you also might have a blend. So when it feels like it's a trio kind of playing really well together, or a fantastic solo of music, you're probably talking about a varietal. And a single varietal and a great solo can have dimension for sure, but when you have a whole host of different things that are coming together and maybe even a little bit discordant, you might have a blend as a result. And so Easter Island Cabernet Catawba blend. Wow. Great call. Stick with it and run with it. If you nailed that, you get extra points. It's evolving again. There's a spice quality to it, so there's a little bit of maybe old neutral wood here. Guys, I'm pretty much stumped. So I'm going to have to do something like, I'm going to have to guess. Is it fair to put a varietal in the wine tasting? Rick, you mean like a blend? Yes, we do put blends in the varietal wine tasting occasionally. We're not trying to play exactly to rules relative to, say, the Court of Master Sommeliers or any other kind of structured area. We just want to taste a wine, and from the standpoint of evaluating it blind, you pick up so much more. You have a greater experience, and you develop your palate in a way that you can't do when you kind of know. And so, it's not from the Canary Islands. Thank you on that one. It could be, right. We could be tasting a Greek red for that matter. Shit. Okay. Why not? Why not? Red wine grapes from the world of wine. Yes, not Lebanon, not Canary Islands. Some of you have peaked. I understand that. I feel the same way. So I'm thinking something whole clustered. I'm gonna have to describe it kind of where I am. I think it's a whole clustered element, something coastal. Yeah, it's young-ish, so 2 to 4 years of age. It's a lighter skinned grape coming from something coastal. So, yeah, like a Sardinian Grenache, Curtis. That's a really cool idea, for sure. I think it's it's got something island oriented or sea oriented. It's maybe got a little bit of whole cluster, or a challenging, more cooler vintage, and yeah, I'm comfortable with that. So I gotta put something, a pin in it. I'm gonna say more like Valpolicella, so Corvina kind of blend, northeastern Italy. Um, Happy, kind of fun, easy wine that's got a little dimension. I think that's 2020. So 2020, Valpolicella for me, northern Italy. Um, yeah, Lacrime di Cristo, the tears of Christ. It's making me cry. It's going to make me cry as I pull this off because I don't think I was anywhere near close. But um, let's see. What have we here? Bojador Amphora Alentejo. Cool. So, as I said, I don't think this has anything to do with Portugal. We are 100% in Portugal. Trincadeira, Moreto, and Tinta Grossa are the three grapes, 40, 30, and 30. And it says right here, amphora, which is a technique, an ancient technique. And you can see on the label, the picture of the wine indicates that you would put clay pots and bury them underground to keep them cool, to keep them cellar temperature, essentially. And the clay breathes a little bit to some extent, and so you get a little oxygen transfer. A wine that has a little bit more of a natural element to it. The fermentation happens in that amphora, and you get a little bit of the volatility from that. You get some interesting grape varieties, and you get Alentejo, which is in the southern central part of Portugal, a little bit more coastal. There's a coastal influence. So this is where knowledge fails, and kind of what we described could have taken us to this region and this technique. Not necessarily maybe pinpointing the technique, but remember what we were talking about in terms of the flavor profiles and some of the elements that we found in this wine, and talking about a technique. This is one that would kind of represent some of that. And where I was thinking of a more kind of Douro, River Valley, bigger, bolder, deeper, richer red wine from Portugal with more sunshine, it wasn't factoring in something from further south. And so I think we did a pretty good job of describing the wine and just didn't have the context and maybe the depth of knowledge to know or expect an amphora wine from Portugal. I think the label is wrong. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That's a pretty cool wine. So that's fabulous. I mean, it's a great experience when you don't get it right. As I've said this before, I think it's fun because you learn something, and you also get reinforced when you get it right, and it's pretty cool and fun that way too. This is a wine that, would you drink again? Would you want more of? It's a pretty unique, maybe even arguably esoteric kind of production. I heard a couple of you say, or I read a couple of you say that you were interested in this wine and liked it. And so it's a fascinating experience, and it's one that for some people, they might say, I don't want to try that wine, and wouldn't try it, and then all of a sudden try the wine in this context and enjoy certain parts about it. So, yep, Taylor, that's exactly right. So we put the bumper rails up and bowled a lane and still only managed to get one pin down, right? So, but I think we nailed a bunch of ideas about the wine that were good. Our tasting was good and on target. It was just, I didn't guide you necessarily to an amphora wine that was made from Portugal. I failed there. If you're interested in doing some more wine tasting this week, we've got a couple things coming up. We are going to do our annual spring wine buying event on Saturday between 12 and 2. An afternoon tasting. You come by. We have about 17 wines, so almost a dozen and a half wines for you to taste in the context of what we experience as professional tasters when we go to a wine trade tasting. So there's oftentimes countless tables and countless wines set out on those tables, and you taste through dozens of wines to find the few wines that you're excited about. Well, we try to dwindle that down to show you about 17 wines that we think are all amazing, and they've been wines that we've tasted over the last year that we've sort of saved and earmarked for this tasting. So you come in, you get a glass, you circulate the room, and you taste some wonderful wines. We're going to have 17 of them, as I said, and here are two of them that we're going to get a chance to try that I've been excited about. We have both of these on the wine list, but they're not wines that often sell, and these are wines that should. They're not because they're a little bit off the beaten path too. Not quite as off the beaten path as Alentejo, amphora-based Trincadera, but these are wines. These are both very old vine Carignan. And they'll be on the table I'm pouring from on Saturday. You've got Pierre Cros coming from Minervois, and he has 100-year-old vines, 80 plus 100-year-old vines in the southern part of France, and his expression of Carignan. And we will pour that side by side with Bedrock Wine Company's Carignan that's coming from the sort of Contra Costa County out more in the valley of California. An old 100-year-old vineyard there too. Some original plantings of this fantastic Carignan as well. You'll get a chance, if you come, to try them side by side and decide whether you want to put any of these in your cellar. The benefit too of being at that tasting is getting a chance to sample, and then we are discounting wines that day for purchase. They're not menu prices, they're more retail-oriented prices. And we're going to do a little inventory reduction. So a number of wines that are in the cellar that have one bottle left, that have two bottles left, or that we just want to make space for some new wines coming in. They're going to be 50% or more off, and they'll be available that day to take home with you. So any wine you purchase from the tasting side will be available in about a week or so, but we'll have a number of wines that'll be first come, first served, ready to go. So if you're interested and want to come out for that tasting, please feel free to sign up. There's opportunity to do that on the wine or on the website. Excuse me. To the final couple questions I have here. Wouldn't pick it himself, Scott said, but would definitely drink it again. That's fantastic. Johnny, to your question about Occhipinti, yes, I have Occhipinti's Frappato on the wine list still. I have some of their Cerasuolo, and I think I have one other kind of special production from them. But yes, and I just got 3 more bottles of the 20. That was my whole allocation for at least the next several months. So the container just came in, and it's highly allocated these days. And so yes, there's 3 bottles left of that. Thank you, Samantha, for your comment about the scallops. That's wonderful. And Rick, yes, that tasting I was just describing is this Saturday. We have another wonderful wine event coming up in May for May 17th with Chris from Renhoekti from South Africa will be here. And we've tried some of his wines in the past. We've actually, I think, had a Chenin Blanc in this context too as a blind tasting option before, but he makes a series of fantastically cool Chenin Blancs, from sort of an entry-level fun one to one he calls Honey Bunch to a skin-contacted version. We're going to try all 3 of those, plus some other reds from him, and a fun tasting on May 17th. So a number of different wine-based experiences happening here at Field & Main in the next weeks to come. If we get to see you at one of those, that will be wonderful. I look forward to that. If not, then I'll catch you on the 3rd Thursday in May as we do this again. Thank you very much. Julie did a fantastic job of stumping us, and again, I apologize for the delay getting to you this evening. Cheers, everybody. Rick, between noon and 2. So if you visit the website, it'll show you what time slots are available still, but we have a number, I think, around the 1 o'clock hour, 2 o'clock hour, something in that frame. You come at that time slot, but you have as much time as you need to kind of taste through all the wines. Cheers, everybody.